Welcome, everyone. We are going to get started here in just a few minutes. We're going to let folks shuffle in, and we'll get started here in just a few minutes. All right, as folks continue to join us, I wanted to go over a couple quick housekeeping notes, and then I will pass it over to Jody to introduce our speaker for today. This webinar is being recorded. You should have gotten that message when you joined, but just want to let you know that the webinar is being recorded. Closed captioning is available. At the bottom of your screen, you can click Show Captions, and captions will appear for you. Q&A is being monitored by our staff. So if you have questions, technical questions, anything to do with the actual webinar itself, or questions for Dr. Schuckers, you can put those in Q&A, and our staff will answer them as we can. Our Q&A will be at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions or anything, reach out to us. Otherwise, I'd like to introduce the Associate Vice Chancellor for Alumni Engagement, Jody Kaplan, who will introduce today's speaker.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you all for joining us for Niner Knowledge today. As Josh said, I'm Jody Kaplan, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Alumni Engagement, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Dr. Stephanie Schuckers is the Bank of America Distinguished Professor in Computing and Informatics at UNC Charlotte. She also serves as the Director of the Center for Identification Technology Research. If that's not enough, Dr. Schuckers has recently been appointed as the co-director of the newly formed Charlotte AI Institute. UNC Charlotte's solid foundation of nationally recognized AI expertise and this new AI Institute will accelerate research that spans business, healthcare, science, and the arts while preparing the next generation of AI professionals. In addition, Dr. Schuckers is an IEEE Fellow, serves on the Biometric Institute Board, is Associate Editor-in-Chief for IEEE Transactions, and is President-elect of the IEEE Biometrics Council. The bottom line is that UNC Charlotte is really lucky to have her. Please welcome Dr. Stephanie Schuckers.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Look forward to speaking to everyone today, and look forward to your questions. So let's get into it. So identity is a key part of how we function in society. In the old days, it had to do with kind of who you know, and while that's still prevalent, a lot of what we do happens online. And with people we don't know. And so you need to set up trust between, you, this the person, and then the business or service that you want to work with. And all of that has moved more and more online and is continuing to move online. So identity is a key piece of that. Who are you talking to? And how do we prove our identity? We know, we have physical interactions where we bring something we have, like an ID card, but that doesn't work so well in the online world. So are there tools that can help us with that? We also use what we know. That's great, passwords, PINs, but this information can be stolen by people who might also know your password or your social security number or information like that. Biometrics is kind of a third pillar. It's who you are, the title of this talk. And it's really a two-step process, which we'll talk about in a minute. So what are biometrics? And identity. So we talked about sort of behavioral is kind of information-based, but there's also other kinds of behavioral and biographic information based. There are information about you, that can be observed. There's information in your behavior in terms of what you do or who you know. And then there's biometric data. That would be like your face or your fingerprint, but it can go beyond that. For different applications, these types of biometrics might be useful for those applications. And so what are some of the applications? Some of them that you may be aware of or even very aware of, relate to, say, your phone, using Face ID on an iPhone or on your Android devices, fingerprint, iris, I've used them all on my phones. And that provides security at the device level. Homeland Security implemented a system after 9/11 of capturing fingerprints. So we understood who was coming to the country and ensured that the same people who applied are the people that entered our borders and that they weren't already on a watch list of criminal or terrorist organizations. So they use fingerprint. They also use face today. India used biometrics, as part of creating a unique ID for each individual in their country. Why did they need that? We have identity is something that we somewhat take for granted, though, as we'll talk about, it is something that's being attacked more and more. But many people in India didn't even have an identity. If you don't have an identity or a document or anything, you don't have access to the benefits that might entail, like loans and bank accounts and benefits from government. And so by doing this, they were able to ensure each person had received an identity, but also make sure people don't have more than one identity and were attempting fraud, which is actually a big problem in the United States with fraud for people posing as other people. Some other use cases and modalities. I talked about the physical documents aren't so useful in the digital world. So there are companies who have products where we actually take a photo of the physical document. They look at the legitimacy of the physical document from features they can gather from the photo of the document. Then they have you take a selfie, and they look to make sure there's a real person there through liveness, which we'll come back to. And they ensure that the selfie photo matches the photo on the document. And I just noticed my little example here. Those people, two different people don't match. Those people, the two different faces don't match at this example. Call centers really have a problem with fraud also. People calling in, posing to be other people, and they didn't even need to have a special voice, because there was no mechanism for the people at the call center to know what you're supposed to sound like when you call in related to your account. So today they ask you a lot of knowledge questions, ask you your birth date, maybe your email address, a few things like that, all these things that an attacker can find about you already and continue to pose as you. So one of the use cases is to add voice recognition as part of the process when you call in. So you enroll the first time you call, and then at later times, someone can't call in and pose as you because now they need to replicate your voice. So how does it work? So it's actually pretty simple. There's just a few little boxes here in terms of a flow chart, and it's 2 steps. And you've probably experienced this if you use biometrics on your phone, which is when you first get your phone, you enroll. As part of that enrollment, it creates a reference, which is stored on your device for later in the database. And as part of that, some information is extracted from the biometric. Imagine key points between your eyes, or what's called fingerprint minutia, detailed aspects of the fingerprint. And then the second step, later on, you're authenticating. And what you're doing there is you're extracting your features again, and you're comparing with the data that was in the database, and a decision is made. So we call that authentication. We might also call this part of the step a query. So you're comparing back to the data in the database. So very, very simple tool. However, it can be used so many different ways, and it's very complex. So I'm going to show you a slide that's a little hard to look at, but I'll walk you through a couple pieces of it. I won't be able to go through the whole slide because I won't have the time, and I forgot to set my timer, but I got the clock. So, this is a slide that you can make, it's actually on the Biometrics Institute website, which I'm going to give you at the end, and is a slide that some of our work helped create through my work on the board there. So there's two big ways the system works. One is called one-to-one. What you're doing is you're comparing that query against a single template. So think of your phone. Probably there's only you in the phone, and you're just comparing against yourself because it's your phone. Think of a passport. You present the passport, and it compares against only your face in the passport. Or that case that I was saying, selfie versus a picture of your document. So that's called one-to-one. Many, many use cases use one-to-one comparisons. The other big section is one-to-many. You're searching a database which has a bunch of people in it, and you're trying to see if it matches, who it matches in the database. Now, this is when it gets really complicated, and we've pulled out kind of 5 big categories, but there can be others of ways that could be done. One would be kind of same idea now, like a passport, but you don't want to have to pull out your document. So say, for example, you have global entry. When you come into the country, they've been test casing. They already have all the images of the people they know were on the plane. And then they're just searching your face against everybody on that plane to make sure you match the people that were known to be on the plane as you cross into the country. So that would be an example of a positive ID case. Then we have deduplication, like that India case, where you're just checking the database to make sure that person already doesn't have an identity and is trying to commit fraud, posing as a new, unique person. Investigative would be what you might see on TV and crime shows. This is usually like a post-processing. A crime occurs. We have some information like a CCTV camera or a latent fingerprint, and now we're searching a pre-existing database to see if we can find a suspect. This has been used more and more. It's been used for fingerprint and DNA for a very long time, but it's happening more for face, which has brought up some questions around what database is it searching? Is the face that you've captured even good enough to make a decision? Is there other information pertaining to the crime that would link to that person? Is it enough just to have a facial match? And of course, these questions are some things that society is wrestling with. And then you have kind of proactive watch lists would be more like the checking against a database to ensure we don't let someone in the country who is already known terrorists. So that would be the watch list. But the other is surveillance. Surveillance with a watch list means like going out on the street and just looking for somebody that is wanted in the public domain. And this is another area that has caused a lot of concern, that the streets are being monitored, and that there could be problems with that in the sense that people could be stopped who are completely innocent, minding their own business. And so these, again, this is another place where it's ripe for controls and legislation. And already we're seeing laws in place in some states that prevent biometrics being used unless it's investigative, in the pursuit of an already occurred crime, or if someone has given permission for their biometric to be used for searching. So kind of these left ones over here. And these ones, like surveillance, either outlawed completely or only used for major events where there's a concern. So I wanted to kind of shift gear. I'm talking about applications. So now you have kind of an idea of all kind of the different ways it could be used. Many of them might not even impact your life, but this is something you are likely to be impacted in the near future, and it's something called a passkey. And when I give this lecture to my class, I always ask, how many people have heard of passkey? And usually nobody, but now I'm starting to see some hands, and I know you're not in the right setting to do that here, but there may be a few of you that have seen it. And if you haven't, I wanted to tell you about it because you might see it in the future. So what is it all about, right? So kind of stepping back to your online experience and why biometrics provides a role in our online experience. It's not saying get rid of, what you have or what you know, but it's adding this as a layer and why we want to do that. The account life cycle, we know a lot about authentication, right? Because we do that all the time. Usually we're doing it through a password and often like some kind of second factor, like a number being texted to you or emailed to you in order to do that authentication. That's okay. But this aspect has a lot of problems, even when you're doing multi-factor. And that's the problem. It's becoming kind of the weakest point for attackers. And so kind of backing up, one of the attacks is called phishing, which you probably have heard of, which is basically someone trying to get information out of you. Often that number that's texted to you, or getting you to click something so you download malicious software that then can sniff out the information you want, or something called SIM swapping, where the user code doesn't get sent to you, but actually gets sent to a SIM card that is part of a cell phone that looks like it's your cell phone, but it's not your cell phone. And so it's a SIM that's pretending to be your cell phone to intercept that ID. So those are the risks right now. And this is where passkey plays a big role. But it's also important to understand the whole life cycle of this, which is your original account enrollment that we talked about before, kind of figuring out who someone is before you begin to do business with them. And there's a lot of risks in that part of the cycle. And biometrics can play a role in that, either through presenting your ID and doing a biometric match, or even now that we're starting to see mobile driver's licenses. So driver's license that sit on your phone that you can match against that, and also check whether the mobile driver's license is legitimate by going back to the DMV that issued the mobile driver's license. Further sort of, cementing your identity in the online platform. Another place where there's a lot of risk is account recovery. So if you have to go to account recovery, which sometimes I find I'm always doing account recovery because I can't remember my password. So I click lost password, which is account recovery, as my main way of getting into many sites because I can't remember my password. And so there's a lot of risk in that step for account takeover of your takeover of your account, and then from there, what are attackers doing? Well, that's what this slide is about. So authentication, I guess this is sort of showing where the problem is. As I said, one of the weak points today is that kind of whole process. Attackers are targeting people based on information they already have, and then trying to get the rest out of them in order to pose as them. Why are they posing as them? Because that's their way into a system. When they get there, they're either going to be targeting your money and your assets, or they will be targeting who you work for in terms of things like ransomware, right? So they would be shutting everything down at that business and then asking them to pay money in order to get their data back. Or they'd be scraping the data out of that company in order to mount more fraud later on. So I'm sure you're aware of data breaches that gather all that information about you, so they have it stored when they want to go after accounts. And as I said, even though, we've all moved to multi-factor, that's MFA or 2FA on this slide, that's multi-factor. unfortunately, the multi-factor that we have can be phished or socially engineered, and it's a pain in the butt for you in terms of using it. So this is all work by the FIDO Alliance, of which I'm an active member of. And what Passkey is it's come out of the FIDO Alliance, which is a worldwide alliance for open specifications for Passkey is the name of it. And it includes some of the major tech companies, all of the major tech companies, as well as banks and governments and businesses from around the world, including the ones big tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, as well as, product makers like Lenovo and banks like Bank of America. So what they wanted to do is basically say, this is not working anymore, passwords. How do we do better? And passkey is how we do better. So that's what this is. So, okay, now there's a lot of information on this slide. I got to tell you what passkey is finally after all that buildup. So passkey is based on cryptography. So this right stuff is all about cryptography. This is the server. So this is where this would be your bank or government. Or shopping, Google, etc. And they want to know it's you on the other side, right? So how do we do it? Well, you've got your first step where you enroll. So you've already enrolled in your biometric, but what in your phone, what your phone does or other device like a laptop is create the cryptography. So the biometric unlocks it locally on your phone to generate what's called a public key and a private key. So the public key goes to the server and the private key stays, like it sounds, private. Only can be unlocked if you use your biometrics. Your biometric never goes over here. It stays here on your phone. And so later on now, you've got this public-private key. It's actually special for your bank. Every bank and every product you use or every site you use will have its own set. And what happens is when you want to log in, a challenge is issued to your device. You prove yourself to your device, and then your device, through this private key that's unlocked with your biometric, sends a response back that can be checked with the public key. If the wrong private key signs the request, the public key won't recognize it. Now, if a hacker comes along and steals all the public keys, doesn't matter. The public key cannot tell you what the private key is. So it's useless in terms of proving to the bank who you are. And so bottom line is you prove yourself to your device and your device proves itself to the relying party like your bank through cryptography. And that's the key piece. And it's very different from what we've done in the past where passwords are stored in password managers and this kind of things, these shared secrets. There's no shared secret here. This public key and private key are different numbers and nothing can be done with the public key. So that's passkey in and of itself. I've got kind of a different picture of how it looks, and it really looks kind of like what you do today. You've probably used your fingerprint to unlock your bank before, but you may not have been using passkey. So what passkey does, rather than using the fingerprint to unlock your password to sign, it's actually unlocking the cryptography to sign and let you in. And so that's the big difference, and why, if you can, I recommend people move over to passkey. And as time goes on, you're going to see more and more organizations using it. Okay, switching gears, almost. Then I'll switch gears. I should look because the slide is right there. It tells me what's next. I just wanted you to see some examples of consumer adoption to date. And so you can go on the FIDO Alliance website to get a lot more information, and I have that at the end. And so, you can see some of the brand names here that already offer passkey, and there's many, 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 many more. All right, now switching gears, we're going to talk about how secure is biometrics, because I get a lot of questions around this topic. And we've been doing research in this area for a long time. So we have the funnest research, because what we're doing is we're trying to attack biometric systems, and we attack it by making physical fake biometrics. So we might have a fingerprint image from someone, and we can create a mold and then create a fake finger like you're seeing here. Or we could do something simple like just holding up a piece of paper. Or in this case, we're wearing pattern contact lenses. So I could create a brand new identity and try to hide my own identity. This is a little gruesome, I'm sorry, but when it comes to the border, you can see how useful fingerprint recognition has been, because it's caused people to obliterate their fingerprints so they won't be recognized. Can't expect all criminals to be the brightest, because obviously that's very recognizable that you've obliterated your finger, but even as something as gruesome as fingerprint transplants. So we don't do this part in my lab, but we do make the physical fake biometrics. Here's some examples of some fake fingerprints that we made and what they look like on the fingerprint scanner. You can see they look no different than a regular fingerprint. And we're doing this work, to expose the vulnerability, but more importantly, to build the tools to recognize when a biometric has been faked. Here's an example of some of our face masks that we made, and I actually have, oh, yeah, that's fun. A face mask here of my own face. So you can see, how lifelike they look and how well they're able to capture the face of a person. And this mask was just built using photographs of myself, not a full 3D scan of the face, and yet still it maintains many of the 3D aspects of my face. It's not perfect, but it can fool a face matcher. So we do this work attacking biometric systems so we could make them better, because we are seeing that people are committing fraud as it relates to biometrics. And these are just some examples going back over the years of using it for bypassing border, stealing cars, using it for time and attendance. When you show up for work, doctors were logging each other in. And then this was taking exams for each other. And so I do this work, as I said, to attack the systems, but mostly to collect the data to build better systems. And those better systems include a critically important thing, which is we think about biometrics as a matching function. Two things should match, it's you. But if it doesn't come from a real life person, it's not you. And so just because it matches doesn't tell me that it's you that I just gathered that information. What tells me that it's you is liveness. It's the information that I really did capture it from that real person at the time I needed it. So it matches and is captured from a real person. And so, it's liveness that's the key, not secrecy. And this confuses people because they worry, and you should worry, because you're thinking logically about data like your password, like your address, your biographical information, your email address. All these questions that are asked, are all data. There's no liveness with a piece of data, right? You just type it in and anybody can type it in. So liveness is the key part to biometrics that can be done. We can measure liveness at the time we're capturing a biometric. And that's the key difference and why it's a good layer to add. So the concern about, well, my biometric isn't secret, someone's just going to steal my face and they're going to get in. Liveness is what helps protect you from that possibility. But we got to do the work to make sure we measure liveness as part of these systems. So iPhone's Face ID is a great example of a system that does incorporate liveness. So they, what they do is, besides the regular physical visible light image that you are used to when you do face recognition, they also do something in the near infrared. They shine a random pattern on your face to get depth information. They also do a device-specific random pattern to really tie you to the device. And they get 3D information. So they have all of these features as liveness in order to ensure it really is you that's comparing a face. And I think that the hackers have found it is difficult to beat, not impossible to beat, but very difficult. So we don't see widespread fraud with iPhones. What we do see is twins and siblings matching each other by chance and getting locked their phones because their physical face features are very similar. So liveness is the key. So we've been working to collect this data, and we run competitions, and we also create benchmark data sets. And we are well known across the world for the work we do in terms of collecting these data sets and making them available for research purposes in order to train systems to recognize when systems are being attacked. So, so we talked about physical biometric attacks like these masks, and physical biometric attacks are hard. So what attackers are doing today is bypassing and not doing the physical attacks. They're actually trying to find a way to hack into a system to bypass the sensor to pretend to be someone else. So what they do is they pretend there's a real camera there. And for systems that not like Face ID, which have these sophisticated extra cameras in there, for systems that just use your regular camera, they can actually hack into the system and then pretend like there's a live video happening when there really isn't. And so then what's the problem there? Well, the problem is that then they can do a type of deep fake called a face swap. So a face swap is when I have a live video and I'm an attacker, but I only have a single image of you. I can take that single image and put it on top of my own face and animate your face. So, but before we get into that, I have a special video to show you.
From NBC News, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. In a surprising turn of events, UNC Charlotte has taken the academic world by storm. The university, which was once considered a regional powerhouse, has now broken into the ranks of the nation's top 10 institutions. Even more astonishing, it has become the official training center for NASA astronauts. Reports indicate that UNC Charlotte's endowment has surged past $100 billion, cementing its position as a financial juggernaut in higher education. And in the world of athletics, its football team remains undefeated. Yes, you heard that right. Great things are happening only at Charlotte.
So you're probably in on the joke here, particularly if this is going to alumni. And, you know, while we can be as aspirational in terms of where we're going to be as a university, a lot of those things really aren't true. And so this video was actually created in cooperation with Charles Bowman, who's the chair of the Board of Visitors at UNC Charlotte. And he collaborated and he actually wrote the script as in terms of what, with assistance from the team, what maybe Charlotte may be someday, but you know, we would call that a deep fake video. And probably you are well aware by looking at it that it probably was a deep fake, right? You know, so the question is, should I be worried about it? You're like, well, I can tell that's a deep fake. Well, we should be worried about it because it's often our systems, like biometrics, are automated, you know, so they're not picking up on some of the things you might pick up, and some of the things that you might pick up can be fixed as time goes on. So what you should be worried about is the fact that this wasn't actually that hard to make. we can do this at scale, and it can defeat our systems. And so this is the work we're doing to understand how it can defeat the systems, and of course, how to stop it from defeating our systems. This is Mr. Bowman's actual voice.
Good evening. In a surprising turn of events, UNC Charlotte has taken the academic world by storm. The university.
So, we were able to change his voice as well as swap his video in this case. So how do we protect against that? So this is an example of another product called iProve, a company called iProve, and their product related to liveness. And so they are using the camera on the phone. And remember, I told you that camera can be hacked, right? So, but they're doing an extra step. They're changing the color of the screen in a different random order of colors each time. So what the attacker, so why do they do that? So the screen changes colors, fine, great, no big, why is that important? Well, the screen, you're looking at it. So when you have if you've ever noticed that if your screen turns like bright red, you can see that the face has some red on it, and then it turns blue, the face will have some blue on it. So it does that random set of colors of light in order to look at the face through the camera and see that those colors actually show up on the face. So an attacker who's bypassing the camera, pretending to be a real camera, but it's really a fake camera, can't anticipate what's going to happen. Or maybe they can if they're very sophisticated, but it really makes it more difficult to mount the attack. And that's what we try to do, is throw things in the way, put layers of security so they can't mount this kind of attack. So this is another example of liveness, simply said. So again, being a key aspect for protecting your data. So I mentioned in the abstract, that there's been a lot of criticism of biometrics around how well it works for everyone. And of course you want our systems to work well, one, for the ease of the use, in terms of one-to-one systems, but also as we start to use biometrics for forensics, we want to ensure that our systems, don't misidentify people. So I have a quick video. I think I'm still doing okay on time. So I'm going to show you this video that talks a little bit about bias and biometrics. And what I'll say is bias is not an inherent thing to the technology. It is something that relates to the design of the system. And that's what this video is going to explain.
Mia, I'm Eric. Nice to meet you.
You too. So you want to learn more about access control systems?
Yes, I run a lab and we need a better way to make sure that only the right people have access to the hazardous chemicals. We're thinking of using a biometric system, but I'm not sure which kind is best.
Well, there are trade-offs with every biometric system. Some don't work as well if you're wearing gloves, for example, or have eye damage or are wearing a mask. So it really depends on who's going to be using it.
I see. I've also read that some systems don't work equally well for everyone, especially facial ones. How would I make sure ours isn't biased?
So when it comes to bias, people often lump all facial analysis systems together: detection, recognition, and classification. While they are interrelated, they differ in how bias can occur and how often. You'd want a facial recognition system to make sure the person trying to access the chemicals is supposed to. Researchers have made a lot of progress on reducing error and bias in facial recognition, but there are still some technical things you should consider to make sure you're choosing a good system. The first one is image acquisition, or how it collects an image of someone's face. The important thing here is to have a high-quality camera. For example, it needs to adjust the lighting properly for people's skin tone to prevent bias. Next, there's the image gallery, which is the database of everyone in your lab that the image would be compared to. We can give you some tips on how to make sure everyone's headshot is high enough quality. And the final thing is the algorithm that's used for image matching. You need one that's been trained on a diverse enough set of people that it can tell everyone apart, even if they have similar demographics.
But how do I know if the algorithm is good enough?
You should make sure it's gone through independent testing. All our systems use algorithms that were tested by the National Institute of Standards and Technology or the Department of Homeland Security and had low error rates across all demographic groups. No system is perfect, but if you follow all these steps, you can make sure that yours
All right. Can you hear me?
works well for everyone in your lab.
Great, let me talk to my team, but I think we will go with one of your facial recognition systems.
Sounds like a plan.
So as I said from the beginning, it's not inherent to the technology. It's something that needs to be designed properly so the systems work well for all. And I think it's very important, you know, the aspect related to the quality of the data. And think about the forensic use case. Where you might have a CCD camera with a poor angle and possibly a hat, right? You know, these really degrade the quality of the faces that are being used, and an important aspect to the decision-making around, you know, whether there's a match. So that now I'm kind of bringing to the end here. So how do you learn more? I have just a couple slides. So we've already mentioned CIDR. CIDR, I'm the director of Center for Identification Technology Research. It's a National Science Foundation center with multiple university sites, and Charlotte is coming on board. I just moved here. And we have members from across industry and government. The next thing is the videos. That was just one video in a series of videos that we have that go over biometrics and answers a lot of the questions similar to the questions that I answered today as part of this webinar. So if you want to learn more, it's a fun thing to go look at. And then the Biometrics Institute, I mentioned that one slide that looks at the different application areas. So the Institute's mission is the responsible use of biometrics. And they have developed things like what's called the 3 laws of biometrics. You know, it's not just about the cool tech, but it's about the policy and the process, as well as ethical principles around biometrics to help government and industry around the world. And the FIDO Alliance, I mentioned, is the group that's doing open specifications. They also have certification programs for the technology to ensure it does work well. And there's more information about that. And remember, FIDO is the passkey people. So what does the future hold? So I'm not actually going to tell you, but I'm going to look backwards in time and I can remember 1993 very well. I was in college, when the internet first came, right? How like astounding it was, right? Like, you've ever heard of the World Wide Web, right? You know, what we called it then. And so this came out, and what was neat about it is you could just chat with anybody, and you could be anonymous, and you could do things anonymously in chat rooms. And so on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog was the joke from the New Yorker cartoon. And in 2015, you can see the same dogs are hanging out there. You know, they're a little grayer, just like me. And they say, remember when on the internet, nobody knew who you were? And I think this is kind of where we are right now, right? You know, like people are attacking your identity, and they are using that attack for identity theft and for gathering information about you to mount future attacks, as well as attacking your employers. And so I co-opted my dog to help us with the question of the future. So can we have it all? Is there a way to incorporate privacy into our systems and to be able to trust the identity that is being projected? And that's through some of the work that we're doing here in the center, and unique ways to put the technology together, like things like passkeys. So thank you so much for your time. Special thanks to my grad students and all my collaborators over the years. And I will open the floor for questions.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Schuckers. That was amazing. Lots of great information there.
Thank
I
you.
think lots of helpful information too. Put me at ease a little bit on some of the security questions I had with the use of my data. Quickly before we move on, all of this has been recorded and will be sent out to you later this week, along with a survey about the event. So if you missed part of it or you need to leave early, no worries. It will be sent out to you, the entire recorded presentation. Chris asked, how closely, if at all, do these organizations work with the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals?
Good question. There are a number of privacy professionals that circulate in this field. So for example, in the Biometrics Institute, if you were to go look at their conferences and their member meetings, there's a large privacy contingent that attends and speaks and presents. The Biometrics Institute is meant to be a user organization. And when I mean users, it's not users meaning the individual, as well as users of the organizations who want to incorporate biometrics for some use case, say a bank, say a government agency. And so they want to understand what are the best practices. And in order to give them that, we have the materials like I talked to you about, but we also engage with the privacy community to provide the perspective, on how to do systems that are privacy aware. The legislation is still catching up in many places in terms of, things like consent. So some states in the U.S. have consent as a law, but it's not uniform across the U.S. Europe has a GDPR, and so which incorporates consent as part of it, as well as the AI Act. So there are good models out there, and it's still work to be done, we'll say. Good, great question. Thank you.
We have a question from Anik. Is there any research going on with the energy consumption of biometric recognition application and how the energy data can be used to hack the biometric data? This might be a broad area, and it's okay if there's not time to get fully into it, but if you have some general thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've seen some of that work. Certainly energy consumption generally is a concern, in particular as it relates to training the models. Almost all the models today are based on AI and deep learning. And as you know, they're data hungry, and processor hungry, so this would fall in that category. I would say for biometrics, the problem is actually somewhat simpler, than other use cases that might be, ongoing all the time, like say autonomous vehicles. But yet, there is a consumption question there. As far as the attacker point of view, I think that I have seen some work on that. I am kind of skeptical that would be a major attack vector for that. I've seen it as it relates to other things like PIN, right? Guessing what your PIN is through the energy signature, which is a slightly simpler problem. But hey, I may be surprised. So if you know something, please send it my way. Thank you for the question.
William asked, how serious is the Salt Typhoon attack on U.S. cellular networks for using text or SMS for two-factor authentication? And should we be minimizing text or SMS as a second factor?
Well, it's back to they're going to go to the path of least resistance. So I would not eliminate text if you have no other option, because still, password plus a text is still better than password alone. However, it is something that's been deprecated in NIST as a good second factor. So I think what you're going to see is that alternative methods will start to be more available in terms of doing multi-factor. So you can do apps and things like that, which aren't relying necessarily on SMS, for example, I have seen as alternative methods. So, might have an authenticator app that may or may not be FIDO, right, on your phone. But even if it isn't the passkey version of it, it will still be better than a text. But don't not do text if you have no other option. Thanks for the question.
We have a question from Claudia. Is there a readily available software for consumers to check videos and confirm whether they are deepfake videos or not?
Oh, such a good question. So actually, as part of our center, we do have an open source. One of our researchers has implemented many open source algorithms for detecting deepfakes. It's called Deepfake-O-Meter. So deepfake, then O, and then meter, like the measurement, Deepfake-O-Meter. I think if you Google it, you should be able to find it. You have to log in or create an account. Yay. But then from there, you can upload a video and then you can try different algorithms and see if it's able to tell if it's a deep fake. This is still a very much a research field, being able to detect deep fakes. And so you will find that it will be accurate in detecting deep fakes, but it might also accidentally detect live video as deep fakes, and then the other way around. So this is very much an active field. There's a lot of work going on in an industry to standardize how videos are displayed. So it gives an opportunity for people to declare it as a deep fake, rather, as a mechanism. And I guess it would not, I'm not going to say deep fake, but it'll say, how has this video been edited, right? And then it'll have information that you can click on and validate. Or if it's not been edited at all, it will give information on that. So that's called Content Providence Initiative, Content Providence and Authenticity Initiative, or something like that. I may have it wrong. And so that's something, Adobe's part of it and a number of other people. So that might be something to look at, to look for down the line. So that way, when you're on social media, there can be kind of almost like you would see on the side of the box that has the nutritional content of food, just the information related to what it is that you're looking at, right? Because, even right now we're being edited as we have a background behind us, right? And so, that's a perfectly valid use case. So, of using these kinds of tools. Thank you for the question.
One more question we had. One of the big concerns, obviously, is security, and you talked a little bit about this throughout your presentation. Can you tell us where all this data goes? We talked about some of it living on the servers of these companies, like your passwords, or the public keys, but some of this biometric data. Where did all this go? Where does all this live? How's it being secured?
Yeah, that's another great question. It is very use case dependent, and unfortunately, that makes it complicated, right? So the biometric that's on your phone, when you're asked, use your fingerprint, to log into your bank, that biometric does not go to your bank. That biometric stays right on your phone. And there's something else, either passkey cryptography or just, a replay of your password, or other, mechanism, that is passed on to the bank to say, yes, there was a valid fingerprint, but the fingerprint itself stays on your phone. But, what's confusing is then, okay, now you're asked to, I think for Airbnb, I was asked to take a photo of my driver's license and then take a selfie. So that's not staying local on your phone. Your driver's license and your selfie, the information is going to be probably not going to Airbnb. It's probably going to a provider of the services, that will, ensure the documents authentic to the best they can, as well as do the liveness and the selfie match. And so So then now you're relying on, the company's policy as to what they do with that information, right? So then that's where you're going to have to click on the small print, in terms of the privacy, to find out what is it that they're actually doing with your data, and how long are they keeping it, and what are they using it for? And so being able to tell the difference is often a little bit hard, in those use cases. When we move to kind of a mobile driver's license, again, your mobile driver's license will be stored locally. The biometric match will be done locally. And so this is a very good use case. And then what will happen with the cryptography is that it'll go check with the DMV to make sure it's a valid mobile driver's license through the cryptography. So that's another good use case of where it's locally stored, but again, you telling the difference, it is pretty complicated. Thank you for the question.
Awesome. Well, I think those are all the questions we got. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Schuckers for the amazing presentation. Again, this will be available. We will email this out to all attendees. Sorry, I'm fighting a sickness. Later this week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself directly. Again, Dr. Schuckers, thank you so much. And we look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.